Good evening. Welcome. At this time, I will call to order the Monday, April 14th, 2025, regular scheduled City of Clemson Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the city's Clemson YouTube channel. If you need hearing-assisted devices or anything like that, please see Kelly over here and we will get those for you. The Planning Commission, so everybody knows, is a volunteer committee appointed by the City Council and serves as an advisory board in the planning and development of our city. We're not employees of the City of Clemson. At this time, I'm going to introduce our commissioners. Commissioner Cumby, Commissioner Height, Vice Chair, Commissioner Rice, Commissioner Crowley, Commissioner Kernigan, Commissioner Yoder, and I'm Herb Tyler, the chair for this year of the Planning Commission. In addition, I'd like to introduce our administrative staff, Nathan Wood, who leads the planning department, Art Holbrooks, Jacob Peabody, and Kelly Roach as our recording secretary. At this time in our meeting, we're going to have a public session. What this public session is anything that's within our purview of the Planning Commission that is not on the agenda tonight. When the agenda and action items come up, we will open that up. So when you come up, please sign in and then state your name and address where you live. So is there anything during this initial public comment about planning of our city that anybody would like to comment on? Seeing that there's nobody here, there were no letters or anything sent in on my civic platform. So we don't have that. So with that, I will close this portion of our meeting. We're going to move to our regular meeting, which is adoption of minutes from our March 10th, 2025 regular meeting. Have all the commissioners had the opportunity to review the minutes? Staff, have there been any updates or changes? Any edits or omissions? With that, do we have an adoption motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from our March 10th, 2025 regular Planning Commission meeting.
Second?
I second it.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. From our last meeting, we do have another section to approve. There was a workshop called for last time. The workshop was held at March 26, 2025, special call workshop meeting. Has everybody had to review the information on that? Are there any omissions or deletions? Is there a motion?
Make a motion that we adopt the meeting from the workshop on March 26th.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Any comments or concerns? Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? So the first action on our agenda tonight is RZNE 000272, 2024 proposed map amendment, Cambridge Drive. Staff, are there any update reports or changes the commissioners should be made aware of?
No, sir. There is a little difference in the presentation. We've updated some slides in it. We're displaying those. So,
Okay.
so if you see any difference, that will be.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Newton if you'd like to update the commissioners on your project. With that, we need to limit to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners. I appreciate your time. I'll try to make this brief. My daughter's playing a Daniel High School soccer game at 7:15, so I'd like to hopefully get there. So, as you mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to do the workshop. I thought it was a productive workshop, and let's see, which button do I hit? This one. So, as many of you seen everything on this slide, I'll just jump right to the couple things that I wanted to point out that maybe weren't discussed in the last Planning Commission meeting, but were discussed in the workshop. I brought up this whole concept of desirability, viability, and feasibility, and I just decided, because there were questions from community and amongst the Planning Commission members of, are there any alternatives that can be done on this property? And so I just like anything I develop or build, I do an analysis, and I try to be as unbiased as I possibly can. Obviously, I'm not in the business of losing money, so I'm not trying to do a project that's not going to potentially have a profit. I know that gets tossed around. Profits is a bad thing, and I don't necessarily see it that way. But I think that anybody that's going to look at this property or anything that they do as a business, they want to be profitable. So I'll just quickly go through the desirability and viability and feasibility. Desirability, it refers to the degree to which a product or service meets the needs, wants, and preferences of its intended users. And viability refers to the ability of a product or service to be profitable and sustainable over time. And then feasibility refers to the practicality and achievability of a product or service. And so I went through and I just did this little chart here of different types of uses for what you could potentially do on this property. The top one is the commercial strip. It would require rezoning. Don't think it would be desirable, viable, and it would be feasible. You could potentially make it work on that site, but I don't think it's desirable or viable. Duplexes, we would require pretty much everything on this list except for R20 requires rezoning. So duplexes would be desirable, and they would be feasible, but not necessarily viable. Garden style apartments, I don't think they would be desirable there, nor viable, or they would be viable to do, but not necessarily feasible. A low rise would fall into that kind of that same category. But I don't think it would be desirable. It would be feasible because you can take and only utilize a smaller portion of the footprint of the land. But I don't think it would be desirable or viable. Office buildings, they'd be feasible but not desirable or viable. R20, as you can see, I don't see that being the best use for this property, which is what it's currently zoned. It just doesn't make sense. It's not going to require rezoning, but it's not going to be desirable, it's not viable, and it's not feasible. And there's a creek running through the property. We know all the challenges that come with that. And to Section 8 housing, I don't think it's desirable there, but I do think it would be viable and feasible. Short-term rentals, desirable but not viable or feasible. Storage units, that's something that we kicked around, is doing many warehouses there. Probably not something that I'm going to be interested in, so it's not something that I would pursue, but possibly, maybe desirable, or not desirable, not necessarily desirable, but it is viable and feasible. Student housing, it checks all the boxes. Townhomes checks all the boxes. Village walk style, it certainly would be desirable. That's the Charleston neo-traditional type development. Certainly would be desirable and feasible, but I don't think it would be viable. So I'm not going to go through the arguments against the development and arguments for. I think we all know what those are. I mean, We know that, again, everybody's gonna talk about traffic congestion, strain on infrastructure, loss of neighborhood character, potential overcrowding, concerns about property values, construction disruptions, and perceived increase in rentals, and then opposition from NIMBY groups. So, I'm not gonna go through this again. I will quickly touch on the things that we discussed in the meeting, the workshop. Is this the laser point? There it is. Well, as you can see around the perimeter, we discussed the landscape buffers that you would have around the perimeter. This is required by zoning, in the RM3. So this is not something that I could do a bait and switch on. They would, Jacob would require this buffer, landscape buffer, and he would have to approve what we're doing there. So this is not something we could get out of if we got it rezoned. Just want to make sure we point that out. This is a plan view. And then I wanted to show a couple of scenarios that we talked about in the meeting. One is putting the fence right at the buffer line, and then doing all the plantings on the neighborhood side of the development. So as you can see, you got the fence, the 8-foot tall stockade, wood stockade fence, and then you'd have the vegetation that would block the fence, and all that would grow up and, make it difficult to see, what's down below. And by the way, the topography is much lower than Monaco. I think we figured out it was about 15, it would be about 15 feet lower than the houses. So our buildings would not be looking down on the residents. The residents, if anything, would be looking down if they could see through all this vegetation. Another scenario would be to put the fence right at the property line and do all the buffering on our side of the fence. And then a happy medium possibly would be to put the fence right in the middle of the buffer and then put vegetation on both sides. And the question got brought up in that meeting, how would the vegetation, how would all the plants and everything be taken care of on the neighborhood side if we chose to go that route? And that was a good question. We would maintain the property just like we would maintain the rest of it. We would just we would just be doing it on the other side of the fence. We'd have to have openings in the fence to get back there to do that. So for me, it's kind of a 6 1/2 dozen the other. I would be willing to work with the adjoining neighbors as to what they would prefer, what their preference would be. If they want the vegetation on their side of the fence, I'd be fine with that. If they want it on both sides of the fence, and if they wanted us to plant stuff on their property, we could discuss that as well.
We got about 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So, I don't know what else I can really discuss. I see this as being an economic decision. I know you are a recommending body, and I would very much like to do this project. I think it would be good for the city. I understand that there are folks that don't want this in their backyard. I mean, that's a very common thing that happens all across the entire country. And, all I can say is that, I live and work here, and, I have the university is, our university student housing is the biggest industry in the city of Clemson. And, that is my business. And it's no different than having a pizza shop or a car wash or a sub shop or anything like that. Those businesses, they're viable because of the college town where we live, and the reason you don't see ton of super high-end restaurants like Rick Irwin's is because they can't be supported by this community. Student housing is the biggest industry in this town, and I think this is a perfect infill site. I think if we just could fast forward and look 10 years down the road, whether I do this project or not, we're going to, at some point down the road, between now and the next 10 years, this property is going to get brought up for development. And why not let a local business person do it? I was just at a conference this past week in Austin with all the who's who in student housing, and Clemson's a very desirable market. And I promise you, all these, can I have just another minute? Yeah, okay. This market is very desirable, and part of the reason it's so desirable, and you can believe me or not, but the main reason it's so desirable is because of the barriers to entry. The higher the barriers to entry in a market, the more appealing it is to these institutional groups. The institutional groups have the money to chase these deals. They'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to put together deals in towns like these because they can. I can't do that. So these projects like this allow me, Rain is a young guy that's been working as a graduate. I hire a lot, I employ a lot of young people. I employ, 57 people. The project itself would have a tremendous economic impact on the area. And I just think it makes sense. And I humbly ask that you take this into consideration and approve it tonight and advance it forward.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks for your time. At this time, we will open up for comments from the public. What I would tell you is I see some of you who have been here. If you do have written comments that you would like to attach, bring that. If you would like to speak, this will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and this session will be limited to 20 minutes total.
I was here last time. I didn't know about this meeting till last minute. But would have been better prepared. My name is Emily Dooley. I'm at 119 Cambridge. This is my son Aaron. We've lived in our house since he was 2. My major concerns are, the list is so long, but first and foremost, I just want to state that I've left messages with Newton's people, and he's refused or forgotten or just has not wanted to contact me. Our property borders, my driveway is essentially one of the boundaries, property boundaries. So I don't care about the economic impact. I care about my quality of life and my son's quality of life. I want to at least get him through high school and live in my house and not have to worry about this development getting put in next door. I know that the infrastructure is in horrendous shape. At the end of my driveway, I talked with Evan Martinette. He came out there and he did affirm that there is a sinkhole forming in the road at the end of my driveway. As you walk Cambridge Drive, there's a lot of cracking that's starting, a lot of the alligator cracking is starting, which indicates unstable road underneath the concrete. I didn't know there was such a science to concrete until I started looking at all that. But so that's a concern for the whole street. I think that Eric has put in enough apartments. I don't know why he has to. Well, that's opinion. I'm gonna try to stick with fact, but so I do know that the infrastructure with that road and everything, I would just want some confirmation if this does get approved, that he's going to address all of that, because I don't want for that to affect my property. It will decrease my property value. Our home is would list probably at about 200K right now, but if student apartments get put in, then who's going to want to buy that house next to student apartments, So that's an issue as well. If the property was when my father purchased it, it was for my son and I to live in, and also as a real estate investment for him.
Yeah,
so
one more minute, okay?
I think it would be really cool if he just used it as that land as a park. He could even name it Eric Newton Park, if he wants his name out there, which I'm sure he does. Because it's going to have to be a complete infrastructure rebuild. The yellow house that sits right on the driveway right on the border right next to my driveway is laden with black mold. So that's going to be an issue when he goes to demo that. I'm a believer that black mold is toxic. My son has asthma. My fiance has COPD and congestive heart failure. So I know a demo will, agitate that black mold. So if it's in that house, it's in that soil. A lot of problems.
Thank you for your
So I wish I was
comments.
better prepared, but thank y'all.
Thank you for your comments.
Evening, Jeremy Vinson, 205 Prince Rainier Drive. I'm the last one on Prince Rainier Street. Drive Street, the sign never says what the maps say. Can't get that right. I've made numerous comments and letters, and I've been here at every one of these sessions. To Mr. Newton's point, I actually missed my son's first developmental baseball game to be here today, so this kind of stinks. Kind of tired of spending my time doing this, but I'm happy to be here to speak on behalf of our neighborhood. Well, I don't speak for the entire neighborhood, but speak for our neighborhood and speak for this area. It does come back to an economic question, an economic situation. Mr. Newton keeps asserting that alternative developments are not viable. And he didn't check any of the boxes for single-family residences. Keeps saying they're not desirable, although people lived in these houses for 70 years. There's 11 other residents on the left side of Cambridge Drive, as well as the lady we just heard from, who all seem to live happily on Cambridge Drive. So I don't understand why it would be not desirable for any new houses to be built there that people would live in happily. The market will set that price as to what those houses would be. But that's the accounting professor in me wanting to talk about economics. So anyway, the idea to me that single-family homes would not sell in that space is a bit of a stretch. Perhaps the true viability question comes down to the fact that he has offered to pay 1.2 or 1 point whatever million for the property to the property owner. And I understand that could get in the way of viability. However, a property's value is determined by two players in the market agreeing what it's worth, and that valuation is only if it's rezoned to R20. He would not have given that number to the owner. I couldn't imagine the property owner came up with 1.2 million, 2 million on their own. That's a developer number that he proposed based on if we can get it changed. So it really comes down to whether it's in the city's best interest to change it. It's not the city's interest to decide what the property owner should make or what they shouldn't make. I'm not saying any of that. It's just, it comes back to whether it's viable is contingent partially upon how the property is zoned, and it comes down to you guys' encouragement to the city or decision to the city. I know it's not a final, but it really, it's what should the property be used for. Frankly, the cynic in me says if it gets rezoned, then really I should band together with my neighbor, the person building across the street from me, and some other folks from Prince Rainier, and just say, let's just rezone our whole street. Let's just, I can get more money apparently if I sell my house and demo it and get it all to be apartments. What's the barrier to call it infill versus, maybe Monaco Estates just wasn't the best use for that property when it was developed 40 years ago, and we should just change course. I don't think so. That sounds ludicrous. I try to be very patient with this process, but, I don't want to see zoning creep coming down Cambridge, and one day when I'm coming home, see that there's a whole row of apartments all the way down Cambridge because we think that nobody would actually want to live in a single-family home on it. I appreciate y'all listening, and I hope you guys make a decision that would leave the property zone as they are. I do not agree about their infeasibility, unviability, or lack of desirability. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
My name's Scott Drury. I live at 213 Monaco Circle. Back up to the property there. Had a question, but I think my question was answered because my neighbor down on Cambridge is here. She clearly doesn't want the project to move forward or the zoning to change. I was puzzled because I don't understand why a 4-parcel block of land is only being proposed to rezone those 3 parcels. I see now that she doesn't want to cooperate with Mr. Newton. But I don't see how the board can then reasonably recommend a zoning change where you would have one orphan property sitting on Cambridge that is bounded by a deed-restricted neighborhood, which just essentially makes it less than viable. I think that she understates how damaging that's going to be to her property value, because that parcel's, even if it was rezoned later, that won't be able to be, viably developed as a multifamily property. So I think from my perspective, you have to recommend things to the council that are reasonable, that aren't arbitrary, but when you have one little triangle-shaped parcel at the edge of this, and you're saying we're gonna make more student housing, I think from that perspective, I think the city of Clemson needs more affordable single-family housing opportunities as well. So I don't think that my neighborhood, Monaco Estates, is an affordable housing option for people. When I was getting started as a young married person, I needed to buy the cheapest house in my neighborhood, and it needed a ton of work. And I think just because those houses need work, they're old, that doesn't mean they're not viable as single-family housing, as my other neighbor mentioned. So I would just join their voices. But I think that it would, without that fourth parcel, I think, unfortunately for Mr. Newton, I don't think that it's viable for you to recommend to the city council. I think that it looks arbitrary, it looks unreasonable, and it leaves one property owner losing out at the expense of a windfall from her neighbors that are absentee owners there. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you taking these things into consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Seeing that there's nobody else, what I would do, just so everybody knows, we received a letter. Dear Planning Commission, first I want to thank each of you for your time to serve as volunteers on the board as stewards to meet the best interests and concerns of Clemson community and citizens as objective and fairly as possible. March 26th Planning Commission's session, and following that gathering, I've learned proposed development will be 4 buildings along Cambridge Drive, 2 with 7 living units, 2 with 5 units, all 3 bedrooms, all 2-story. There are also 4 units along the rear property line of Bud and Monaco Estate homes, each with 7 living units, 28 total, having 3 bedrooms and all 2-story. They're large and impressive 2-story living. Will only have a mere 15-foot buffer, half the distance between the 10-line markers on a football field. Between the apartment, 7 home properties between 211 Monaco Circle, 201 Prince Rainier Drive. I will not reiterate the genuine concerns that many of us in Monaco Estates have that have already been expressed. Personally, I provide a message to the city website on March 26th meeting regarding the zoning change and to allow for multifamily housing. I ask you imagine yourself in the position as a zoning change to allow for multifamily housing. I'll ask, prospective family with 3 kids looking to purchase a home in the Clemson area. Think of the following. You've been working with a realtor and there are 3 homes in the general area. You've decided are a good fit for you with nearby amenities that are desirable. As a couple, imagine one of you looking at your spouse and saying, honey, there are 3 homes that look like they fit our family needs. None are perfect, but let's choose the one that has 4 7-unit apartments behind it. There's a 15-foot buffer between the apartments. I can never imagine these statements happening. I do think RM3 zoning to allow along Cambridge Drive is reasonable. I do not think changing zoning from RM20 to RM3 along the back of this property to allow 28 living units to be constructed is appropriate or fair to us families who've invested our resources and family lives into living in these homes. With the above thoughts, and as stewards of all property owners, directly or indirectly, I request a zoning change R20 to RM3 for the entire Cambridge property for which the request is being considered be denied. Most sincerely, Roger and Kathy Troutman, 103 Prince Rainier Street, Clemson. Then we had one other comment that said, request that the Planning Commission deny. So those are the comments. We'll leave that part closed. At this time, discussion from the commission. John, let's start.
I mean, looking at the elements from the comprehensive plan, I know that we've got growing density and all that kind of stuff in our future outlook with the university growth. But the main concern with the land use, with protecting the residential stuff, it's a tough sell when there's so much in between. Going from R20 to R30, and I don't know, I think it's all valid points that Eric makes as far as density, and maybe that draws in outside people who may pitch something later, who knows, but I don't know. I think it's a big jump, and we've got a lot of stuff in between, especially having the opportunity to actually have a step down in zoning between these two, from high to low. You've got a perfect chance right here, especially with the future stuff along Cambridge, to get a step down between the high and the low density. So I don't know that I really have any questions at this point. We've covered everything last meeting in the work session. I think I'm good.
Commissioner Kernigan, any comments or thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a blight as it sits, and I think it's a good way to infill property. I think it'll help the city. I'm fine with it.
Commissioner Yoder?
I don't have any real questions or comments, to be honest with you. We've done it, this is like the third time, I think. So I've heard everybody's stories, requests from both sides. My only issue is, that's what's causing me such heartburn, is across the street for the other single-family houses and the one single-family lot that would be left untouched. It's a hard sell for me for that, from that point. It's not necessarily the properties on the backside as much as it is what's going on Cambridge at the moment. I don't really have any.
Okay. Commissioner Rice?
I'm going to echo what Commissioner Yoder mentioned. Yes, third meeting, and I've kind of spoken what my thoughts are on the project. More especially that we are in the middle of finalizing our comprehensive plan, possibly moving into zoning update and zoning study for the entire city. And because this particular property was not mentioned in the land use map, the old land use map, or the Clemson Next study, I just have a hard time getting on board with it. And also that single property right there, that would put this lady in a bind, you know, kind of landlocking her. But I just, as of right now, I think the biggest thing for me is that I don't want to set a precedent of us rezoning any land when we're in the middle of a comprehensive plan and possible rezoning survey.
Commissioner Hyde?
I agree with what's been said. My concern is just protecting the neighborhood and the buffer and the situation that you put the lot in. I appreciate the gentleman that shared, because even the homeowner, we don't know how it would affect her property, but chances are it would put her in a bind. So I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Covey?
Like several have said, I guess I don't have any more questions. I really appreciate the workshop that we had and having a chance to learn a little more. My initial concern was the buffer, and I felt like Mr. Newton did a good job of addressing that and having some flexibility in his plan. And I guess knowing that he would be looking down, the people behind would be looking down, made me feel a little better. But then I go back to what has been mentioned, with the Mrs. Dooley and that triangle piece is a big concern for me, as several have mentioned, because it puts her in a bind. And then, as Commissioner Rice has mentioned, looking at things going forward, and we've got a lot of important planning coming up. So I don't know. I wish some of those questions were addressed before this came before us, but I understand that the timing and the landowner needs to sell that property too. So that's what's really, giving me heartburn too, as Commissioner Yoder said.
It's going to end up there later.
Because there's several sides to this, and so yeah, I've just been back and forth with it, but I don't see how I can support it knowing when you take everything into account. But I do like the plan that was presented. I just don't think it's good timing.
Does anybody need any other information? So, first and foremost, what I would say is being respectful is very, very, very important. And sometimes when people are passionate, one way or the other, I really like to think people don't mean to be disrespectful. But I would just encourage everybody in situations like this to seek to understand. And while you are passionate, to consider all points of view. The thing I would tell you is I know that we are in the middle. It's not just a comprehensive plan, because the reason comprehensive plans fail is because you don't look at zoning. And that's just a national fact. That's why they fail. But comprehensive plans need to be fluid. They need to be understandable. They need to be where everybody can look. But people need to understand that there's a lot of factors that go into that. You can't pick just one that go into that. So for me, one of the things that's hard for me is I know that we're in the middle of that, but I also know that we're in the middle of taking a look at rezoning things in terms of what our zoning looks like, and that takes some time. So with that being said, and there are no more questions, is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion that we send a negative recommendation on RZNE-000272-2024 proposed map amendment, Cambridge Drive.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion on the floor. Any comments or discussion? Seeing that there's none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion to, say it again?
Send a negative
recommendation
to City Council.
The City Council. And all in favor of that, raise your right hand. All opposed? With that, that would be the recommendation to City Council. City Council has the final decisions. All we are is a recommending body. So as that proceeds forward, it can still go to city council. With that being said, this action item is closed. So the next thing, are there any advisory items?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, we're just gonna wait a minute. If people wanna leave, we'll let people do that before we move forward. So we do have 2 discussion items tonight before us, and you should have them here. Jacob is going to bring those forward. One of them is based on a discussion that he and I have had, as well as other people, and he can explain those. The first is text amendment for fences.
Okay, so this has come up from some practical experience recently with, fence being installed, some that are already there, and what we're just witnessing around town. Our current ordinance treats all roadways the same as far as fence height. So, and we are pretty strict about doing kind of shorter, pretty fences in the front yard, which is absolutely appropriate. But when your yard abuts an arterial road, the proposal would allow me to give authority to do a taller fence in that situation. And it's treated as like an administrative variance where I could put any qualifications on it that I felt necessary as far as pulling it back or doing landscaping upgrades, those types of things. So it would allow so the map you see on the projectors is the roadway classification map for the city. And what you're seeing in orange are the major and minor arterial roads. So anything that would be a major or minor arterial road would be eligible for having a taller fence in the front yard, up to 8 feet, depending on my purview. And this would not need to go in front of any BZA for a variance. It would be handled administratively.
So an example of that,
Yeah.
Example, that would be Cambridge. So, actually, Mr. Vincent's property would be one, so how he's at the end of that, where a road that he's on the corner of, he's in Monaco, then he also has a frontage on Cambridge. And he would not be eligible right now to do taller than a 4-foot fence, even though his property's down below and everything like that. This would allow him to do a taller fence along Cambridge Ave only. Other would be, 93. You'll see, the thing is, you'll see people have done this around the city. There's one farther down Cambridge Ave. You'll see over around the whole neighborhood there. You'll see some on the back of the Riggs Drive neighborhood along 76. But our current ordinance does not allow for that. So this is, only on arterial roads, these are what we call major roads, high traffic roads, one would allow for taller fences. This would not be like one that's in a neighborhood.
So it's the orange roads.
The orange road, so you have 76, 123, 93, Issaquena, College Ave, 133, Cambridge, Pendleton Road, is that Pendleton? Yep, Pendleton, Old Stone, and Cherry. Now, it's not to say that I would necessarily approve them everywhere, but where appropriate. It gives me that authority if a situation arises that would be appropriate. Now, some of these, like Pendleton Road, I don't know if I'd really approve one along there, but that is still classified as a minor arterial. So it gives me latitude to do it.
So you would drive by the property and?
Yeah, I treat it basically how we go through a variance application is they would come to me and ask, because it doesn't give them the right to do it by right, it has to be approved by me. So I would go out to the site, see if the site conditions warranted it, see if there was a way. So I might say, okay, if this was 6 feet tall and had bushes in front of it, I would approve it. And it gives me the authority to put those conditions on there.
And this is only for corner lots, not anywhere along the road, right? And what it says in here is.
Correct.
So so some of the houses on Pendleton up front, those are.
Yeah, if they only have a frontage on Pendleton Road, they would not apply because they only have a front yard. Their house is facing Pendleton Road.
And part of the issue is, with this, is uniformity. So the way to picture it is, when I wrote down Cambridge, if I've come from Issaquena on the left, there are already fences all the way that high. And then you go, and all of a sudden, we're saying, no, we want to drop them down like this. Jacob administratively knows what needs to be done. It does not change the ordinance from the standpoint of him changing the ordinance. It's, does it make sense? Does it fit? Using his judgment in those situations to be able to do that.
And like Commissioner Crowley kind of got to, is this is really for rear and side yards. This is not like if it's their front yard, it would just look weird. It doesn't function like that, you know, that's not what we're proposing.
Yeah, that's not-
I think most people, I want to say, have the right to have a quiet, private backyard.
Right. It'd be more for those where your house fronts the side street, but your side yard is on there, and so you don't have to go 6, 6, 4. You can have your whole 6-foot fence around your backyard.
Exactly.
Any other questions or concerns or recommendations with how it's written?
The only thing I would add is that, you know, we talk a lot about how words matter in the verbiage, is that if you, and you may tell me it's not needed, but down in the first bit of red, on non-arterial roads, maybe add in per City of Clemson roadway classification map. It may be redundant, but just to make sure we're covering every piece that we possibly can.
Yeah, that makes sense. That way people can't be arguing with us. We have a set standard that we go by.
Right.
I do like that.
Jacob, could you guess for the commission and myself how many of these have come in front of you, say, last year?
Only one.
Okay. Last 5 years?
Last 5 years, 3. It's not a very common thing. There's not that many houses that are in this situation, to be completely honest.
Or they're doing it without coming before you.
Yeah, it's more likely someone just did it. Let's be honest. But, yeah.
That tends to go worse for them, hopefully.
It's very much worse.
You know, we want our ordinances to make sense, and, you know, that's it, basically make sense.
Yeah.
Protect where it should, give people the freedom where it should, where we can. We want to give people as much freedom as we can, with still protecting the you know, intentions and aesthetics that we are striving for.
Have you ever had any complaints? Like the people that are recommending, or people that are scoffing and doing it on their own? Has anybody ever actually complained about it either?
I've never had a complaint about a fence on arterial road. I've absolutely had complaints about when someone rogue built fences too tall in the front yards in neighborhoods.
Well, yeah, but that's not what this is.
That's not what this is.
Yeah,
but
I'm just saying
I've never had a
this.
complaint of this situation.
Right, okay, yeah.
And I think it'd be worth pointing out, just because this is a piece of the zoning ordinance, the applicant would always have the option of appealing to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Sure. That's state law.
Yeah.
So, you know, they would always have another route. If he would not approve something, they can appeal his decision to the BZA. Again,
And so could a neighbor.
We can't do anything about that.
A neighbor could, if they did it in a timely fashion, appeal my decision as well. Okay.
Any concerns? Okay, we'll put this on the agenda as an action item.
Excellent. And I'll make those changes as recommended by
Yes.
the board.
Thank you.
Okay.
The second.
The second is buffers. This is something that we've been playing around with for a while. We've took input from the BAR and our own experience, and from developers and everyone else, just trying to get it things. So you'll notice a couple things, just a change to the definition. We didn't have tract development in the definition, even though it was already used in our buffer ordinance wording, so we just added a definition for tract development. Again, this gives, depending on me, if the application is being approved internally by myself, or if it's being approved by the Board of Architects review. The intention currently as written would give the board the options to move the buffer where it's located on the property. Sometimes elevations really make a big difference, and it would be a lot better if we say move the buffer up the slope or move the fence around in the buffer. So it gives us some leeway. And then the rest of it, in general, makes our buffers larger and more robust. It separates out multifamily from, before multifamily was treated the same as duplexes and patio homes, which we felt was not quite appropriate. So multifamily, townhouses, tract developments all have separate classifications now, and how they butt up against different types of neighborhoods. So it really does go a long way to protecting our R20 and R12 neighborhoods, our kind of like our traditional neighborhoods are well protected by this ordinance. It also takes into consideration the height of the proposed buildings next to it. So it's, you know, where if somebody's proposing a 2-story building, 3-story building, or 4-story building, that actually affects the width of the buffer. So those are all things taken into consideration. We even start buffering against roads in certain situations where we think it's deemed appropriate. Again, on arterial roads, if you're doing a development in there, you might want actually for the people there and everyone else to have a buffer in there. That is basically the gist of it. You can, it'd be kind of hard to go through the specifics of a table like this, so it's better for you just to read it out and get to me with your concerns.
Just one question for clarification, this is mainly just for implementation stuff. Where you've got the berms with the ratios of 3:1 to 4:1, running that, so is that put on the edge of the property, but then do you have to back it up to meet the slope on both sides of that, or is it sloped up just going to the edge of the property? So you've got for the 6-foot berms, you've got a maximum slope of 4:1. So you need 24 feet to get to a 6-foot berm. Mm-hmm. But does that run up in hard cut, or is that 24 feet off the property line and then 24 feet in further from the peak?
That would depend. So if it's flat on both sides, it would be both sides of it. If we're going up a hill or that situation, it would be just the one side. I guess I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
That's what I was just trying to. That's what I'm just. This and if I
setback. Oh, huh? And we would, again, it gives us a little bit of latitude in there. If there was a situation where a retaining wall made sense, we might, entertain that as an idea.
Right. Well, that's what I was. This is just, and this I may be getting off topic from what we're discussing as far as, but just from an implementation standpoint of, okay, you've got this the maximum slope, so I can, I want to put the berm instead of the fence, so I get my 20. I've got room for that. But do I have to slope it down on the other side, which means backing it up on mine because I can't necessarily control the neighboring property, or get up to 6 feet and then hard cut? You see what I'm saying? If we're doing the berm as the fence on the property line?
Yep. I would be more inclined to allow for the retaining wall on the interior side of the buffer.
So 25 feet off the.
Yeah.
Okay. That's I was just trying to figure out if that means that, okay, you actually can't do anything until 24 feet in or 48 feet, how far in, if you're doing a berm, you can come before you can actually.
Yeah, it would be the 24.
Okay.
So in G, it says 6-foot high masonry. What do we mean there?
6-foot high masonry wall?
No, on G, on the page.
Are you talking about a G-class buffer?
Yeah,
Last
one, last page.
Yep.
Is that worded the way it's supposed to be?
You're talking about?
Or should it just say 6-foot high?
6'2" foot?
Oh, 6'2" foot.
G line.
That is a typo. It's 6-foot high masonry wall.
Okay, so my question for you is, does everything have to be masonry? Do you have the ability to look at other materials beside wood and
As that's
masonry?
written, that would be have to be masonry, but I can absolutely add the language saying, I'll probably do that as another thing that, because the big thing was, there's certain walls that we just don't want to be the wood walls.
Right.
But like you said, if there is of a quality material, someone want to do like a Cortez steel
Yes.
wall, I want that ability to prove that. Let me work around that. Let me play around with how to do that materials.
And I think,
I probably would add it where the other parts that gives me the area to move around where the wall is, say, or, of higher quality or equal or higher quality materials for the wall. Let me work around with some language with that, but I understand what you're saying.
right, I mean, there are newer materials that are coming out that you see that can be used, and I think restricting it to not allowing for those materials, because that can make it more attractive, particularly if it's abutted to R20, can make more attractive than.
I think so too, but I think with the masonry stuff, if you're looking at where it butts up to like residential or something like that, the density of those masonry walls provides some sound deadening and stuff as well. Whereas if you do metal panel fence or whatever, it may actually amplify noise coming from one property to the other. So that, I mean, I'm not against it, I'm just saying it might be one of those things.
That was the intention of why we did in that particular situation.
Like if there were the berms and the masonry, like that's big dense stuff that's killing noise, so it's not shooting, it's not just a visual break, it's providing a real barrier.
Well, and there's some newer ones that are made out of the steel of both that are infilled.
Oh.
Yeah, there's actually a product they make that is steel with foam in between them that is purposely made for deadening sound, so.
Right.
Yeah, let me play around with that, but
I think he needs the ability to look at it.
Yeah, I just didn't want to get written in where it's like, I can pick a steel
No,
one, and it's
they
gonna
don't
be
pick.
some, 28 gauge sheet,
To tell them what they need to do.
yeah, let me play around with a way to make sure that's safeguarded and, again, meets our intentions, but I do understand what you're saying, because there are products that I'd like to be able to approve in that situation.
You got,
And you never know what's gonna come out in the future.
you got the masonry up there in E as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, that I'd probably do it as kind of like how we did it, where the placement of the fence is that I'd be able to approve, that material or something of greater quality for the intentions. So let me just think about what makes the most sense, but I understand what your intentions are.
Are there any other questions or?
Any guidance at this point? And obviously, if you see any spelling mistakes, let me know. More grammar. Again, since this is just at the discussion items,
Right.
if any of you have any comments in in between this, and we'll probably bring this up for an action at the next meeting. If any of you guys have anything, feel free to reach out and let me know any of your thoughts. And that goes for the public too. If anyone in the public has any thoughts on this ordinance in the meantime, feel free to contact me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Staff reports.
I don't have really, well, we got a public hearing that we got set for the 5th. It's going to be the
Bonding.
rate. There you go. Very good, Mr. Chairman.
Bonding.
Yes, the 5:30 on the 5th. It's the bonding for vacant commercial and mixed-use structures. So at the time of, this is approved last year, it's just now moving forward to council. And the ad is actually coming out tomorrow, or the next day, anyway, in the paper. And then we'll be announcing it on the internet too, through blast email.
Jacob, would you basically come back up real quick for the people here and tell them basically what that ordinance means?
Absolutely. So the bonding ordinance requires for the mixed-use developments that you see going in downtown, where you have the apartments above commercial. That will require any of those developers to either build out the commercial at the time of CO for the residential, which is our preference. They would just build it out and they'd have, commercial going in at the same time. Or if they fail to do that, then they'd have to post a bond in the amount of 150% of the build-out costs of building out that commercial. Then as it gets built out, that gets returned back to the developer or the tenant as, however they want to deal with it. So, but basically it's putting the money into an escrow so that, it can be used for what we want, the, build out of those commercial spaces and, getting businesses into them.
So that, just so everybody understands this, what people have been asking for is also tell you that it was very much consideration, just like people have been asking for updating the buffers that you've worked on it. Thanks for your hard work, but that's for members of the public as well as for the members here that were not here during this discussion. So we did hear you, City Council asked for it, and it was sent back, and it's done good. Thank you. Planning Commission representation at council meetings. I'm there for most of them and have been trying to help answer some of the questions that.
Is there a second reading on the rezoning for the affordable housing? Is that
Second reading, yes, I guess that should have been my staff report, is the first one passed unanimously. And so the second one will be on the 5th of May to come before council again to vote that. If that is approved, that will move forward with their funding structure. The developer will go for their funding. So they'll keep me updated on that, or Art, and we'll update you guys as that comes along.
Any future workshops, other events? None. Do I have a motion? Any other business or comments from the Planning Commission?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, stay here. We're gone. Thank you.